U.S. Joining me now, Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. We've got a lot to go through, but first, Jamil, what is going on in Cuba with the Chinese spy operation, and why is it back into the headlines now?
Well, Arthel, this is an interesting story reported a few days ago by a newspaper that the Chinese had agreed with the Cubans to spend a few $1 billion to actually put a spying station on Cuba. Initially, the Biden administration said that report was inaccurate, and then came back and actually said, well, actually, we inherited this issue from the Trump administration, and that spy station has been there since 2019. So a little unclear on the administration's position on what's going on with that spy station, how long it's been there, what it's doing, and what they're doing to get it off that island, just 90 miles off the Florida coast.
Why would the Biden administration say, at first, hey, this reporting is inaccurate, only to turn around and say that, don't worry, it's actually real now, but we inherited the problem? It seems like a suspicious flip-flop. Is it that, or is it some sort of way to protect some sort of security operation that we shouldn't be talking so freely about? What's going on?
Arthel, it's really hard to know. This is kind of like the spy balloon. If you remember, the Biden administration said at first this was the first time we'd seen this. Then they backtracked and said, no, actually, there had been multiple spy balloons in the prior administration that had been reported. It's unclear whether they're saying that the report that it was going to be a news station was inaccurate and simply that it had been there for a while. They did clarify, though, that it's been there for a while. But what the real challenge, of course, is if that's true, why have two administrations in a row, including the current administration, allowed a major Chinese spying installation just 90 miles off the U.S. coast? That's the really troubling thing, and no real explanation from the administration other than saying we're engaging in diplomatic efforts to find out what they're going to do to push back on that fact.
And doesn't the U.S. also have spy capabilities based in Cuba?
Well, we obviously have the Guantanamo-based naval station that we have on a long-term lease from Cuba. We have a number of facilities there, including obviously the detention of terrorists. And we have spy installations around the globe, both in our country as well as allied countries. We have spy satellites. The Chinese have the same. It's not surprising to hear this. What I think is important here, though, Arthel, is just such a close distance into the United States mainland, coming so soon, this report after the Chinese spy balloon. Why didn't this conversation come up during the spy balloon incident? Members of Congress seem surprised and concerned about the administration's reaction. That's obviously concerning also if they haven't informed or fully informed Congress about what's going on that island as well.
Yeah, it caught my attention when I first read the reports, too. I'm thinking, what's going on? And we all want to get to the bottom of this. Let me play some sound right now from Brigadier General Robert Spalding. He's a former China strategist for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Let's listen and we'll talk about it.
In Cuba, they'd be looking at and listening to what our military aircraft ships are doing out in the area of the Atlantic Ocean. So it is significant. It's a concern primarily because I believe that if they are to invade Taiwan, they're probably going to try to create some kind of distraction. And a good place to have a distraction is Cuba.
So he says if they are to invade Taiwan, they're probably going to try to create some kind of distraction, and a good place to have a distraction is Cuba. I mean, Jamil, this sounds ominous. It sounds premeditated. What should the U.S. do?
Well, look, we should obviously push back aggressively and say that we're not going to accept a Chinese spy installation 90 miles off our coast. We've also had a couple of other really concerning incidents just in the last few days. We saw that Chinese warship cut in front of a U.S. warship going through the Taiwan Straits in open waters. We saw an RC-135 harassed by a Chinese fighter jet just a few days earlier. And of course, this is all in the context of President Biden saying, well, maybe it's time for a thaw in the relations with China, for things to get better with China. He sent the CIA director over to China secretly to meet with Chinese leadership. He's sent Jake Sullivan to meet with senior Chinese leadership in Vienna. So at the same time that the White House saying it's time to thaw things with China, the Chinese are harassing American military vehicles and upping their spy game just 90 miles off our coast. That's very concerning, obviously, Arthel, and something we need to push back on much more aggressively.
Yeah, and you've got some experts are saying, hey, don't worry, China does not want a war with the U.S., but China wants Taiwan. So where is this heading?
Well, President Biden has said that we'll defend Taiwan with American military troops if necessary. Of course, within minutes of every time the 3 times he's said that, the White House staff has said, no. What he meant was we're going to send supplies. But the truth is, the Chinese clearly are getting aggressive with us. The question is, when are we going to tell the Chinese, look, you need to stay away from Taiwan, be very clear, not ambiguous as the White House has been, going back and forth with the president saying one thing, Jake Sullivan saying another. We need to be clear and forthright. Tell the Taiwanese, tell the Chinese that we will defend Taiwan if it comes to that, and they better not cross that line.
Yeah, and you, of all people, Jamil, you realize that there's certain things the public doesn't have to know all the specific details about, but what the public does need is to feel that things are in order, the administration has a handle on it, so there's a way to communicate that without giving away those secrets. But we need to have confidence that something is being done to keep us protected.
That's exactly right, Arthel. You got it right on, 100% spot on.
All right. Well, all right. I wasn't looking for that. I was looking for your take on it, but I'll leave it there. Jamil, Jaffer, really always appreciate your expertise on these subjects. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. Thank you, Jamil. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks for having me on, Arthel.
Okay.